An atmosphere of suspicion, which is unfair on everybody.
I think there's a lot of work to do, and this is one piece of the puzzle, and we need to make sure that we get the other pieces in place.
Are you concerned about that at all, sir?
Very concerned. Today's question period, so let's see what happens.
No, but are you concerned at all?
The report speaks for itself.
I think the issue is we just need to get clear answers so that we can continue our work.
The findings of the committee are concerning, and they should be.
Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland there today conceding she's concerned by findings that some parliamentarians have wittingly aided foreign states. New information that comes from a report to Parliament on foreign elections meddling. It was conducted by a committee of their peers with top secret security clearance. It's a bombshell allegation dropped with little detail. The report does not name names, and the government says the ball is now in law enforcement's court. Here to talk about all of that is our front bench. Former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant is with us. He's now the CEO of Space Canada. Former Conservative Industry Minister James Moore is here. He's now a senior business advisor with Dentons. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is with us, as is the Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Rob Benzie. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Tom, how big of a deal is this revelation from where you sit? As someone who has sat in Parliament, I should say.
From my point of view, it's a very big deal. And that's the preoccupation that you were sensing in the various members of Parliament who were being interviewed today, whatever side they were on. It dovetails with the whole foreign interference issue. And the basic problem there is well defined by Steve Meyer in his new book. He talks about the fact that seemed to be the beginning of the greatest difficulties for the Trudeau Liberals when they weren't being forthcoming on what happened with regard to the foreign interference that they talked about, because they boasted that Mr. Trudeau had scolded the Chinese president on the issue. So when he got back to Canada, no transparency, pass it off to David Johnston. It was a long haul. We finally got Commissioner Hogue, who's been doing very even-handed work, but she's complaining that she's not being given access to cabinet documents that she's supposed to be able to see, even if she doesn't quote them publicly. She's got to know the context. And it's the same sort of thing here. The government's saying, oh, we're going to hand this off to law enforcement and nothing to see here, move along. We didn't even give the names to the committee. Well, hold on. Aren't people allowed to know what's in there? Dominic LeBlanc, ready answer. No. An intelligence report, that's not evidence. It's really nothing. The same sort of thing they said with regard to CSIS's work when they were before the commission, just basically throwing the whole thing under the bus. So I think, Vassy, it's going to leave a very bad taste in the average Canadian's mouth, looking at this saying, but if this is our democratic institution that's being, assailed in this way, we have a right to know more than what you're giving us. And I think it's going to hurt Trudeau the same way the foreign interference file has been dragging on and hurting him for well over a year and a half now.
That's kind of the big question, James. Do you think Canadians have a right to know who these individuals are, if they still are in Parliament, if they no longer are, the specifics of the allegations? Like, I get it, it's national security. This is intelligence that was provided, but now the cat's out of the bag, or whatever you call it. Like, I feel like the questions will keep coming.
I think they have a right to know, and I think they should demand to know. And I mean, as a Canadian, I would like to know, are there any current Privy Councillors or former Privy Councillors, any current cabinet ministers or foreign cabinet ministers, any senior officials in the government who have shared information with them that might taint Canada's best interests? I had the privilege to be part of the NAFTA Council, which was a cross-partisan, cross-ideological effort to work together in Canada's best interest. Imagine, when Donald Trump was president of the United States, if somebody was leaking Canada's negotiating strategy to Americans because they were somehow were wearing dual hats in terms of their loyalty. Well, people would say that they would go apoplectic about that being not in Canada's interests, selling out Canada's interests because you serve multiple loyalties. Well, the same principle should hold true with regard to China, with regard to India, or with any other bad actor. And I think the most troubling thing about this is that this is now the third of 3 reports that have confirmed that Prime Minister Trudeau knew and or should have known and had the obligation to know that this was going on, and that he should have put in place safeguards to protect against this. And now every member of Parliament, because nobody is named, is now stained as a consequence of Prime Minister Trudeau's inaction. And I think that's shameful leadership.
Do you think, Brian, that the government or anyone involved in this will be forced to talk more, to say more, add more meat to the bone, rather than just sort of this one sort of conclusion that this happened?
Potentially. I mean, look, I agree with sort of the overarching sentiment that this is a big deal and this is something that should definitely be of concern. I am going a little out of my sort of lane here, but the sense that I have is certainly that they're basically trying to make the argument, the government's making the argument that, look, this is, yes, some intel, this is some things that the committee looked at that would lead them to believe this, and this is serious and it should be looked into. But I think that they're not necessarily feeling that it has passed the stage that it's really sort of past allegations and or proven. And I'm saying this, I'm totally out of my lane, but that's sort of the vibe that I'm getting with how the government's trying to react. So I think that's why they're saying, look, this should be in the hands of the sort of legal system to see if anything should be pursued and what should happen. Now, that said, there may be some things that fall within the confines of the law, but that are just completely unethical or against the oath that some MPs took. So that, I think, is going to be maybe where it's a little more nuanced. So if somebody does go through sort of the legal process and it ends up that, yeah, there was something that wasn't great and shady that happened, but it doesn't cross the line into being sort of illegal or being pursued by the courts, then I think that's where it's going to get a little more nuanced. Are there things that should happen with regards to the role that they had or that they currently have, and what should that potential outcome be? So I think that's the vibe I'm getting. I think they're taking this seriously, but I think they're just not ready to say this is definitive and here are the people that crossed the line and did this, did that. I think they want the sort of process to unfold with authorities.
And I should really point out, Rob, that we reached out to the RCMP to find out, in the dozens of investigations they've opened, they've said, into foreign interference, does this form part of any of those investigations? We have yet to receive a response to our query. I guess, to Brian's point, all of that may be true, but that's not really what the government said today. They basically just said it's in law enforcement's hands and didn't provide any more meat on the bone about what their plan is going forward to assure Canadians that there are not people in our parliament who are basically working with China or India to interfere in our elections. Like, that's not a small deal. I feel crazy, but like that to me does not feel like a small deal.
You're right, Vassy. It's a huge deal. And I don't know what's more underwhelming, the government's response to this or the fact that the opposition isn't burning down the house over this. And I suspect it's because diaspora politics is at play, and the Liberals and the Conservatives in particular don't want to offend huge swaths of the Chinese community or the various Indian communities in Canada that are very, very politically important and influential. But this is a big problem. And the thing that I didn't like about what the NSCOP said yesterday was that you're basically casting aspersions on every former parliamentarian. Are we saying, Tom and James, could you come in the room? We just want to check and see if you guys might be compromised in some level because you're former parliamentarians, privy councillors. I mean, it's very worrying, and I just think it's not fair to current or former MPs to have this out there, because you know what it's like, Vassy. In nature of war is a vacuum, and so do journalists, and everyone's going to be finding a red under every bed if we're not careful.
Yeah, just very quickly, before we take a break, you're right that the Conservatives did not, this did not make question period. I will, to be fair though, until the leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, got up, it was his first set of questions, and he did talk about it quite a bit. The other two parties, not as much.